Okay, good afternoon, Federica.
Hi, Franco.
You can start. I must just say that the audience is still high, uh,
Okay,
and
very
so I
good
mean,
news.
let's use this time to to quickly start and go ahead with the program. The floor
Okay,
is yours,
thank you,
Federica.
Franco, and thank you to all of you. Of course, it's a very great pleasure for me to say a few words at the end of this forum, or not just the end, but at the during the last session. And I'm very grateful for having had the opportunity to organize this event together with FIBAF and previously with Anya since many years. We start 10 years ago, Paolo, right? And of course, on behalf of MIB School of Management, I would like to thank all the people that joined this conference, also in this online edition that is, of course, not so easy if you consider the communication and the networking activities that this year we have missed. But also, from a logistic point of view, maybe is more simple at the end of the day. I would like to express in particular my gratitude to all the panelists and speakers for sharing their expertise with us and for giving some information, advice, and suggestions also during this particular period that is very challenging for all of us, for our institution, and also for all the companies. And I would like to thank all the good friends of the Trieste Investment Forums, because you are so kind to have attended the event for many years. And let me express my wish that next year in 2021 we are able to meet again here in Trieste at the MIB School of Management, of course, in perfect shape. And before to move to the last session, I would like to thank also all the IT team of the MIB School of Management that worked and is working now very hard to organize all the online sessions and all the activities before this webinar. Now, Franco, it's time to start with the last session, and I'm very pleased to give you the floor and to start with the last part of our Trieste Investment Forum. Thank you, Franco.
Thank you, Federica. So very quickly, I have pointed out some outline which came from the forum, considering that there are some issues which we didn't cover because we were more concentrated on the financial. So we didn't speak about democracy, nationalism, migration, but we have some let's say words which regarding the role of the state, the geopolitical scenario that probably we will discuss more in this session, the social resilience, the environmental impact, the healthcare situation, and then the economic consequences. Well, some point I have collected from the several sessions. I have to say, sustainability. We have discussed about sustainability, partnership, and solidarity as a key words. Also, the role of the multilateral development bank as a response to the pandemic crisis, and likely default of subsidies loan made by public sector, but I mean, this will be reflected to the regulators. So regulators to think about the exit, not penalizing banks or insurance in the restructuring phase. Of course, healthcare to be more available and accessible. Support a comprehensive recovery plan integrating the green transition and digital transformation, which has been, let's say, many times discussed and mentioned here. The change, dramatic change of insurance approach, especially with sustainability, even if it is undeveloped in the Southeastern Europe. Negative impact on employment and wages, as we know for sure. And then the other issue is that manufacturing supply chains, which has been mentioned during the forum, has to be considered very well, because the COVID issues has let's say disrupted the supply chains, and particularly in this part of the world where multinational companies have their operations. Then institutional and retail investors will be prepared to take equity in Southeast Europe. This we have discussed in the last. For sure, we have to encourage private sector investment flow into the region and do to foster into the development of capital market in the region, which is underdeveloped, sure. And then what about SMEs and in the new investments? And finally, one sentence, which probably for Gianfrancesco will be, let's say, has been evocated during the forum. Never waste a good crisis. So, and with this, I'm finished my intervention. So, this just to tell you what we have discussed and what was the, let's say, the outcome of the several sessions. That's up to you. I leave the floor to Paolo, and then to the other speakers.
Thank you very much, Franco and Federica. I think a few words drawing on the rich discussion we have had, and trying to look ahead of the curve to this coming year and the following years, to see what are the prospects. I think if we look ahead, we have reasons for caution and concern, definitely, but also reasons for confidence, and some optimism. Let me start from the former. I think the pessimism really comes from the geopolitical situation, and it's really basically a short-term dire straits that we will have to go through. I mean, this will be a year full of tensions. Let me list what's in the pipeline. The American elections. The American elections are going to be very contentious in a social climate that it's with racial tensions. So I think it's something to watch very carefully. The risk, as Graham Allison was saying in his excellent book, the risk of falling into Thucydides' trap because of the global conflict between an old hegemon and the new hegemon rising, drawing on Sparta and Athens, and all the history after that is there. And so I think, this is something that we will have to live with, and then we'll have reverberations in our part of the world, because I mean, all the main global players are active, and actually increasingly active, in the Western Balkans, and so the risk is that the Southeastern Europe will become an area for geostrategic spheres of influence. We have still the Brexit imbroglio ahead of us, possibly facing another cliff edge. I know the sensible things to do, we all know, would be to have another delay, but I mean, there are things possible in terms of logics and rationality, but not in terms of political feasibility. The question in the EU, and I think this is a strong point, is definitely better, but it's not settled. I mean, we should not. I mean, we have had in the European Union a very strong response, a very swift response from European institutions, European Central Bank, the proposal of the Commission, the Next Generation EU. So I think after some initial hesitation, we have had a very important response. But still, this will have to be implemented. It will have to go through Council. There is the Karlsruhe affair, and the political situation in many member countries is not settled. And you see, I worry that the climate created by the emergency measures, which have been in many countries, including my own, piecemeal, rather scattered, is that there would be new polarizations, the perceptions of unfairness. You got support, I didn't get it, I deserved it, you didn't deserve it. These kind of perceptions that might create ground for new divisions and new extremism. Then, the domestic idiosyncratic sources of instability in the countries of the region, local elections, etc., etc. So I think, you see, the geopolitics, back in the background has to be watched very carefully. But let me come to the reasons for optimism and for confidence. I mean, I have basically four that, in my view, are particularly in the medium term quite strong and quite important. First of all, the resilience of global value chains. I think global value chains were hit by the crisis, but definitely they are not dead. I mean, Galateri said it very clearly. So they are now being redesigned, reformulated, but there is no going back. So we will have shorter, more flexible, more digital chains, but there will be adjustment. Adjustment is already underway. We have seen it in Italy. In Italy in the last few years, very difficult years for Italy's low growth, high public debt, but the export sector, small, medium firms in the export sector have been doing fine. I think, venturing into new sectors, not only the 3F, the fashion, food, and furniture, but also, the pharmaceutical sector. In the last few years, Italy has become a European hub of biopharmaceutical sector and packaging, machine tools. So I think, there is a dynamism in the private sector that in my view, promises well. I mean, there will be definitely opportunities also for Central and Eastern Europe, because nearshoring means exploiting Eastern Europe, for instance, as a hub for e-commerce that is having a boom, obviously, now in terms of warehousing, in terms of call centers, and depending on export. I mean, if there is a strong recovery in Germany, in other EU countries, this should pull, if you want, the recovery also in Eastern Europe. The second reason for optimism goes to the heart of what we are discussing, which is financial markets. I think the resilience of financial market. I think this crisis has been different. You remember the famous book, This Time is Different, but I think this time has really been different. I mean, Rick Watson said it very clearly. We were very close to a financial meltdown as 10 years ago, but this did not happen. And actually, it didn't even make the news. We hardly remember of any financial problems in this crisis, for two sets of reasons. First, because we had a prompt and coordinated response from the authorities, from central banks, and from regulators. So I think financial safety nets, the ones that we had prepared, if you want, for this crisis, did work and work well. I mean, dollar swap lines were put in place very readily, and central banks intervened very swiftly in a matter of a weekend. And I think this is a fundamental change. You see, I think we have ditched this old orthodoxy that coordination is not needed in economic policy, particularly monetary policy, because after all, with the flexible exchange rates and controlling capital flows, you can do whatever you want. I think we have a new, more sensible orthodoxy now, whereby you see central banks, the main central banks, really, and regulators are much more sensible and intervene with refinancing operations, relaxation of eligibility criteria and prudential rules, moratoriums, etc., etc. So this is the public side of, if you want, of the market, the infrastructure of the market. But also the private side is equally reassuring. I think we have and we have seen it at play: stronger, more capitalized, healthier, diversified financial sector. And I think we are learning that integrated cross-border financial markets are a fundamental instrument of resilience, of flexibility, not like in the previous crisis, something that increases, if you want, amplifies the shocks, and they are essential providers of liquidity. So, the full use of liquidity and capital buffers, etc., etc. So I think, investing in the development capital market is very important. Now, we have been discussing how we do that in a region where we have the same problems that we have in the rest of Europe. Excessive bancocentrism, underdeveloped capital markets, underinsurance, and so on and so forth. But I think we have been working well in the past on this, and I think we should continue to work well. The third aspect that I consider an asset is the increasing awareness of the importance of sustainability and resilience. The idea that this recovery, post-COVID recovery, is either green, more sustainable, or it is not a recovery, will not be a recovery. So, because I think it's through sustainability that we establish this essential link between health and prosperity. Now, this is not theory, but this is really very clear now in the minds of investors. Investors have become and are becoming increasingly aware and attentive to that. Think of investors who invested just before the pandemic on entertainment and discos. I think for them the idea of stranded assets becomes very concrete. It's not this idea that we had with climate change. Yes, assets may be stranded, but it's a secular process. It's a slow train, and hopefully will come in the long term when we will be dead. No, I think this is terribly concrete. It's happening now, and so I think we need to live with black swans, and so we better learn to live with black swans now. Otherwise, the future may become really grim. And finally, I think the pan-European dimension, I think that was mentioned by several speakers, the idea that, we look at this region also in terms of the broader context of the relationship between EU and the moderating role, because in this global exchequer that is becoming so much full of uncertainties and risks, I think the soft role of European power, the EU, can become extremely important, covering the middle ground, the ground of sensible politics. And I think this, if this is the perspective, I think what has been and still is probably the periphery of all peripheries. This is really, this small group of countries in Central and Eastern Europe, small economies, but so become again central to the wider European context and the wider Euro-Mediterranean space. So I think this is in my view. I know this is something on which we have been building, investing as a concept in the past, but I think this as a conclusion that I draw from the discussion becomes more and more relevant. We should invest in the pan-European dimension. I'll stop here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I mean,
I finished.
yeah. I heard you. Franco?
Franco, I'll turn the floor back to you, Franco.
Yeah. The mic is off. Okay.
So,
okay.
according to the program, Richard should take the floor now.
Okay. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much for the invite. Like many people, I'm sad we can't be there in person. This is really one of the best events of the year, I think. And like many people already said, I hope very much we can be back together in Trieste next year. So I will just make 4 points, basically. I'll try to comment, respond to some of the things that have been said already on this panel, and also especially from the first panel. So the first point, I think, is that, and it's maybe an obvious point, but I think it's important. This is a fundamentally different crisis to what we've seen before. You know, as economists, we're always looking for a template, for a model. And for this crisis, there isn't one. You know, I think we can say with a reasonable degree of certainty, this is worse than 2008 in terms of the downturn, but it's a very different type of crisis to 2008. It's not, as Paolo was just saying as well, it's not a financial crisis, or it's not yet a financial crisis. And so even though the downturn now is going to be deeper than 2008, the recovery, when it comes, might be quite different and in some ways better. You know, this long hangover, especially in the Western Balkans after the financial crisis. There's no obvious reason to think that will be the same. That will be the same this time. And so when the recovery comes, it may well be better than a lot of people expect, I think. The second thing is about vulnerability and resilience, and identifying those things now and this year and next year in Eastern Europe and the Western Balkans. And I think if we want to talk about vulnerabilities, you know, there are lots of things we can mention. It's been very widely reported, you know, in the media and lots of economic research, including ours. You know, what are the vulnerabilities of Eastern Europe? What are vulnerabilities of the Western Balkans in this crisis? And we know that the healthcare capacity is not as good as in Western Europe. We know that a lot of countries have this very high tourism dependence, and that will be hit, you know, particularly hard. We know that public debt is pretty high in some countries already going into the crisis and will rise further. We know there's a big reliance on capital flows, on remittances, on FDI, and it really collapsed in the first quarter of the year, all-time low in terms of capital flows out of emerging markets. We know there's a big reliance on SMEs in the economy, as Jim mentioned on the previous panel, and others as well. All else being equal, they won't have the resources to ride this out like bigger companies will. And we know there isn't as much policy space, especially in the Western Balkans, you know, monetary or fiscal. There isn't as much space to respond. So these vulnerabilities are there. But I think it's also important that we talk about the resilience and we identify the areas of resilience in the economies. And one very obvious one is just the virus hasn't spread as much in Central and Eastern Europe, and especially in the Western Balkans. And I think you can certainly make the case that that will influence how economies open up, the speed with which they open up, and how successful this opening up is relative to countries like Spain or Italy or France or the UK. So I think that's one potential area of resilience. Another one is that the Western Balkans are not as trade dependent as, say, the Visegrad countries or a lot of Western Europe. This collapse in global trade, which we're already seeing this year, none of the countries will be as badly affected as the Visegrad. And even those that are a bit more affected, like Serbia, it won't be as bad as a lot of other European countries. And I think the other thing is the international support. And there isn't much to say on that. It hasn't already been said, but I think the international response has been good. I think a lot of lessons have been learned from 2008. And, you know, the Western Balkans has already got a lot of support. And so I think there is this resilience. And our forecasts are that the downturn this year for the Western Balkans, it won't be as bad as the rest of Central and Eastern Europe, and it won't be as bad as a lot of Western Europe either. So it will be bad, not to downplay what's going on, but I think there are reasons to think about resilience. The third point I wanted to make was about this new normal and what this new normal actually is and how much will actually change. So, of course, some things have already changed. You know, online retail has boomed. We're not going to go back to normal with that. The role of the state has expanded. We're not going to go back to normal with that. I think public debt will rise everywhere, and so taxes are certainly going to be higher as a result of this crisis. So, I mean, these things will change. But I think in a lot of ways, this crisis, what we will see is the new normal will be very much like the old normal, or at least an intensified version of that. And then that, I mean, for example, inflation is going to stay low, interest rates are going to stay low, maybe even more so than was the case in the past. I mean, we've seen what central banks have done already. I think the labor shortage, labor skills issue skill shortage issue is still going to be there. Okay, unemployment will go up for 1 or 2 years, but such as the outward migration from the Balkans, these questions are going to come back, I think, pretty quickly. The continued delay, uncertainty about EU accession is still there. I mean, I'll be interested to hear what Goran says about this, but the Zagreb summit outcomes, there was nothing really concrete that wasn't said in Thessaloniki in 2003 that I can see. I mean, Goran might see it differently. And I think linked to that, the role of China is going to remain very important. What we discussed last year, the role of China is going to remain. The fundamental reasons China is in the region, why many in the region welcome China in the region, they have not changed as a result of this crisis. So I think this new normal, there are new things, but there's a lot that's really looks rather like the old normal, I think. The fourth point I wanted to make was about opportunities. And there's a lot of talk about opportunities in this crisis, and it's useful, I think, to already think about it, even though there's uncertainty. One thing is the nearshoring, which has been mentioned by a lot of people. I think, from perspective of a German or an Italian or an Austrian investor, proximity is a bigger advantage than it was in the past. Those investments outside Europe look less secure than they did before, and the attractiveness of Eastern Europe rises. I think when it comes to a lot of that new investment or potential new investment, though, it will be the Visegrad countries, Slovenia, maybe the Baltic states who will benefit. I think most of the Western Balkans will find it harder to attract that. I mean, maybe Serbia, maybe North Macedonia, but I think that part is going to be more of a challenge for all the familiar reasons that they've had to struggle to attract that kind of investment in the past. Where the opportunities may become more is in the services in the digital sphere. I think, so far, services hasn't been outsourced to the same degree as production. That I think will change as a result of this crisis. It's shown how much more can be done remotely. It's given, we've achieved a boost to the digital economy and services outsourcing in a few weeks that probably otherwise would have taken 10 years. And I think in that sense, we know there are already IT hubs and other kind of services hubs in the Western Balkans. I mean, that I think is something that the region can benefit from a lot more. And so those are my initial points. I'm happy to expand on anything in the question. So I think, I don't want to downplay the severity of this crisis. It's huge. It's bigger than 2008 in economic terms, but the hangover may not be as bad, certainly from the financial sector. And there will, I think, be for the Western Balkan countries some opportunities in this crisis.
Okay, I mean, Goran, you should.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. You would remember in the last two gatherings that I participated in the Trieste Investment Forum, I was strongly lobbying for a regional approach, and I was trying to explain in more detail what is this idea and what is behind the idea of regional economic area. And I would like to use this opportunity today to, in a way, report to you what has happened so far, and in the light of the crisis, to just kind of a bullet points refer to what's been prepared currently by the Regional Cooperation Council, by the economists in the region and the European Union. What are they planning to do in the coming year and in the coming years, also reflecting the crisis. As a kind of a report, if you would remember, there are 4 pillars in the regional economic area. This is trade, investment, mobility, and digital integration. When it comes to trade, what's been agreed, so this is already what happened, is that additional protocol 6 to CEFTA agreement on trade in services has been adopted and is in a process of ratification in this economy. The decision on establishing the validation procedures for the mutual recognition of authorized economic operators and their programs has been adopted and is in force. This is all related to trade. Decision on facilitating trade for fruit and vegetables has also been adopted. CEFTA customs risk management strategy has been adopted. Full cumulation and duty drawback is already in force. When it comes to investment, regional investment reform agenda has been finalized, has been endorsed, and it is offering seamless access to the regional market, reducing obstacles to investor entry, strengthening investor protection, and promoting the region as a single investment destination. Besides, investment policy reform action plans are endorsed and are under implementation as we speak. Financial markets development mechanism, and we've been hearing in the previous panel on financial markets, this mechanism on regional level has been established as well. Regarding mobility, The Declaration of Recognition of Higher Education Qualification in the Western Balkans has been endorsed. Operation and implementation plan on reporting on the recognition of academic qualification has been established and been endorsed. Commitment to meet European standards and guidelines in quality assurance by 2021 has been pledged by all Western Balkan economies regarding digital integration. Digital agenda for the Western Balkans has been endorsed and is in implementation. A regional roaming agreement signed and been implemented as of July 2019, bringing a real result in substantial decrease of roaming charges among the Western Balkan 6 economies. High-speed connectivity in the region bolstered, with half of Western Balkan economies performing above EU 28 in 4G coverage. So this is what has happened already. And I'd like to say, first of all, to start by briefly saying that the socioeconomic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic are expected to be severe for the Western Balkans. Governments are taking unprecedented measures, and I think that this has been mentioned by almost all speakers who were referring at the Western Balkans. Regional economic integration has to be, and this is my position, a prominent part of the socioeconomic recovery efforts of all economies if the region needs to rebound and take full advantage of recovery measures. So mentioning Zagreb Summit, coming back to what you've said, Richard, I fully agree with you. There was no political breakthrough. But I would like to say what has started in Sofia has been deepened in Zagreb, and this is something people do not see. But there is a list of programs, including programs being financed by the EU, which was until recently open only for the EU members, now being open for Western Balkan 6 economies. I think this is perhaps something politicians cannot play with, but this is a real benefit for the people, that there is a list of programs which is now open for the Western Balkan economies. And I'd like to say that this is a step into right direction, bringing economies into what is the EU performance, what is the EU regulation, and what is the benefit, meaning being financed. I'd like to spend another several moments in simply sharing with you what you should expect in the coming years in all of these 4 areas. And then later on, if there is an interest, we can discuss in more detail. So regarding trade, what you expect is that the main objective of the trade is going to be to enable effective trade in goods and in services fully. And the new phase of regional economic integration should seek to capitalize on regulatory convergence, driven by harmonization with the EU acquis and trade promotion factors. The agenda for 2021, realistically speaking, rather than 2020, and 2021-2024 should consist of different components. One is facilitation of trade in goods, another one facilitation of trade in services. Then electronic commerce agenda seeks to remove key barriers that exist now, and this is going to be one of the positive results of the pandemic and the way we reacted. And the trade-related activities include addressing a number of areas that can further support regional trade. CEFTA is going to be crucial in this respect in the coming years in order to deal with dispute settlement. This seems to be a key for the future if we want to make this whole project on regional economic area alive. Regarding investment, which has been discussed in detail, I mentioned what has been achieved, and now the biggest challenge the Western Balkans economies face at the moment is how to perform properly in order to prevent the economic downturn from transferring into a prolonged depression. I'm happy to join those who were more positive, more optimistic. Richard, you, Paolo, both of you share with us this more positive expectation. I have to say that when it comes to financing, I think we are going to see real results end of this year and then in the next year. And then we can realistically say to what extent the region has suffered together with the rest of Europe. Well, regarding investments, the agenda, which has been prepared currently as a kind of Balkans joining the Green Deal of the EU, is related to investment policy reform. So what I mentioned has been achieved now really needs to start performing. Investment promotion. The idea is to continue promoting region as a single investment destination, and there are different initiative in this respect. Then industrial development. As a result of the crisis, there is more talk of industrial development in the region. We have already seen results in a move. It's not only Serbia, but Serbia for sure, but the others as well are moving into this direction, and they will continue. Regarding financial market development, well, in the next phase, I think that financial liquidity of micro and SMEs and stronger cooperation of financial authorities, including international players, and we have had some representative of EBRD here, is going to be of crucial importance in the coming year, and the need is to develop and diversify financial markets in Western Balkan economies. This is of crucial importance because, in all frankness, though there is a Green Deal and this kind of new thinking, and I guess there will be more of investment in sustainable energy development in the region, we have not seen so far IFI is ready to put real money into public-private projects regarding biomass, for instance, when it comes to energy generation, water. We have seen smaller projects, but not the attitude to look at the region and to see what is needed in the region. I am aware of the ideas that there should be a time in the coming years to really use this opportunity to massively invest in the green energy in the region, and I would advise to go into this direction, but this is not what we have seen so far. I think what might be needed in the near future is to deepen financial markets in the region, to develop cooperation among Western Balkan economies in exchanging information, sharing lessons learned, etc. Then to integrate select segments of financial markets within Western Balkan economies and with the EU. In this respect, I think fintech products are something we should take a look into our future, also as a result of this crisis. I don't want to skip the human capital development, because I think it is of huge importance for the region. Thank you very much, Paolo. You've touched upon by wrapping up also on migration, what does it bring? I would like to say that the EU is ready to support engagement in the region in developing more positive narrative, and they are putting money in this respect. I'm part of the engagement, and I have to say, first of all, congratulations. Italy was really forthcoming, putting also pledging money. Austria as well. Serbia joined. Bosnia followed. North Macedonia as well. But I need to tell you that some around who are part of the broader region are not yet ready to engage in actually just using the money available from the EU to model this narrative to be more positive when it comes to migrants, in order also to see them as something we have received, people who will be also in the region, not only in Germany or, I don't know, Scandinavia or wherever. So we should need to invest in education and being ready to engage them in the labor market, because they might also be needed in the region. Therefore, I'd like to mention this. Speaking about human development, I'd like to say that the future action also done by Regional Cooperation Council in the coming years might be related to removal of obstacles to recognition of all professional qualifications, not only selected areas within the region, and harmonization with the EU. Then removal of obstacles to recognition of academic qualifications, I mean diplomas. Then there are different initiatives. I'm going to briefly list them. One is to develop a fast-track recognition of higher education qualifications. Another one is to reach an agreement on recognition of primary, secondary, including professional VAT qualifications. Then an agreement to reach on recognition of non-formal and formal learning, because this is a real novice now. Then to reach an agreement on access to study in the Western Balkans, to go for an agreement on access to study between EU and the Western Balkans. So these are perhaps small projects, but this is a realistic outcome of the Zagreb summit, because this is now going to be supported, including financially, from the EU, to go for the Western Balkans EU agreement for equal treatment of the students. This is going to be important. We do have example of Austria, for instance, which is already implementing this measure, but not all others in the EU. Then there is a need to develop an agenda for West Balkans to become part of Erasmus Plus programs by 2025. This is what I meant when I say Zagreb Summit opens some doors in order to have Western Balkans being part of the EU projects, and this is very important for the development of human capital in the region. And there will be also initiatives related to mobility within the region and between the region and the EU. Then open science, the initiative is to really bring the Balkans into all initiatives, finance and develop for the EU member states regarding the open science. This is going to really strengthen the capacity in developing human capital in the region. Same goes for open innovation ecosystem. When it comes to digital transformation, the new social and virtual reality cannot caused by the pandemic has forced policymakers to rethink the policies, and the new agenda might include digital infrastructure and connectivity. It will include digital skills and competitiveness. This has been mentioned in London summit of the Berlin process and is now back on the table. Then there is a need to engage in trustworthy regional space, speaking about digitalization. So a lot of investment I would expect, and engagement. It's not only about the money, in order to make the regional space trustworthy. So it is related to cybersecurity measures, the development of artificial intelligence in a manner which will be trusted by everyone in the region and in the EU. And then there is need for conducive and competitive environment for innovative businesses. This is a novice for the region. I've already seen investment coming not only by EU, there are also many projects supported by US, and I'm grateful that there is this engagement to use the existing potential in the region and to link it with the EU. So here, I would like to stop and just wanted to make sure that we understand what has been achieved and where will the region go in the coming years. And if we have a question, we may go back and discuss in more detail what exactly I meant by saying something is coming in this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Goran. I think you made a very broad picture, considering trading, investment, mobility, and digital and innovation. And also thank to Richard that you made a picture, a very synthetic and clear picture regarding particularly some words which are important, like vulnerability and resilience. And then the specific, of this crisis, which is completely different from the crisis of 2008. Today we have seen speakers saying that at that time the financial sector was a problem, and the banks. Now the banks are, say, part of the solution. So. The financial crisis has a completely different impact this part. My personal question is, but then I leave the floor to Paolo. If this, let's say, process of accession of the Western Balkans, it will be increase the speed or it will reduce the speed? Because that's one of the points that we have left. At the state of 3 months ago. So now, in the new situation, this will be more favorable, or it will be, let's say, like before, or less. Paolo, I leave the floor to you with this question, but it's my personal question. I'm very interested to know if everything you have said concretely will bring to a new good situation for that area, from our point of view, of course.
Well, I think I agree with Goran that the policy world is moving. It's not a fast train. It's a very slow train. It's almost like a snail, but it's moving onwards. And I think we should be careful enough to also capture the weak signals, not only the noise. And so I think, but I do agree. I mean, the sense of your question. That, you see, I think we have an optimistic vision of the future, at least in the medium term. If we manage to get through with damage control 2020, 2021 could be a surprisingly good year. However, I mean, the main challenges this year and the next come from the policy world. I mean, the policy world, not only because we have difficulties there, but also because the challenges they are paramount and they are a precondition for doing what we want to do. I mean, we discussed, I mean, to get to the widening of the institutional investors base that is needed to provide funding for patient capital for long-term investment in infrastructure, small, medium, et cetera, et cetera. But we need welfare reforms. So we need welfare reforms. We need, you know, pension reforms. We need health reforms. Now also linked to the weaknesses we have seen in the functioning of health systems. In order to really redesign incentives and disincentives for you know, the development of private and public equity markets, we need tax reforms. And actually, on some of these tax reforms, we need also to consider not only the domestic, the national level, but also the European level. I mean, when we talk of digital tax, and I know this, this is something on which the European Union is not shying away. I mean, we are discussing this. It will not be easy to get to a conclusion, but we are discussing this. Disaster risk reduction policies. There again, we need. See, I want to take, you know, almost to give the last word to Galateri. When I, with a little bit of provocation, I asked him, but what do you think of having new models in terms of new partnerships between public and private sector on health and insurance sector? You know, can really, particularly in the prevention and in the monitoring, could do a lot. And this response was very candid and very clear. We are open. We are open. And I was saying, I mean, to tango, you need to have two people to tango ahead. And so I think, you know, so the appeal to the policy world at all levels is to really be open, to come forward with in the private sector. I think the ground is fertile for launching new initiatives and of partnership, but we need the policy world to come along, and not only, I repeat, at domestic level, but at the level of international cooperation. And if you want, there is a problem of stepping stones there, because I think, you know, only through domestic reforms, ambitious domestic reforms, we can have better integration of European markets. I mean, you mentioned the speeding up of the accession process. There again, I think we need domestic reforms and to speed it up. And but then that would enable also to speed up the process international at the European level, and that would give more authority to the European and more power to European institutions to play a more convincing role at the global level with the Bretton Woods institution, with the IFIs, as Goran was saying. Definitely, I mean, we need an extra gear, and actually on that probably we are not moving forward. If you remember, with the special issuance of special drawing rights 10 years ago, we haven't seen anything like that with a crisis which is much more serious now. We have not seen movement in terms of providing funding, as Goran was saying, for basic global infrastructure, because I think with a pandemic, by definition, you need global infrastructures, and then. So I think, you know, on this, the policy challenges are enormous, but I think we have no choice, in moving forward and trying to push and create virtuous circle, if you want, virtuous circle of private innovation and the public reforms, and the two encouraging each other rather than vicious circles. I would stop here, Franco, if somebody else wants to step in, and then I think we probably need to close, because I think we are.
I could make a couple of points maybe to Franco's question on responding on the EU membership question and EU accession, because I think it is the most important question probably. I mean, 4 brief points that occurred to me. I think one is that we've seen since the financial crisis for a decade now, the EU has been very focused on internal issues, and especially the euro area, very focused on internal issues. And it feels like the policy towards the Western Balkans is stabilization, ensure basic financial, economic, political stability, but I don't see the strategy, the big initiative for a push forward towards accession in the last decade or so. I think that is, one issue. The second thing on regional cooperation, which is a subject which also is very close to my heart, and Goran, I know, is been very involved in this. I mean, it's undoubtedly a positive thing, but the risk is that it becomes a substitute for EU accession. And in the end, I mean, looking certainly as an economist, the potential upside of further integration within the Balkans, more trade, more investment, it's positive, and it's certainly positive in terms of political normalization and the political ends that it serves. But the Western Balkans is 0.6% of the EU GDP. I mean, what the region really needs in terms of economic development, someone mentioned it before, it isn't really growing. It doesn't really grow faster than the rest of Eastern Europe. What it needs is the jolt that the other countries got in 2004, 2007, much more access to the EU budget, the big boost it gives to big, large-scale foreign direct investment, the boost it gives to governance standards, these kind of things. That's really, I think, what the region needs. The third point, as long as this delay goes on, as long as we kind of go sideways or not very far with the accession process, the presence of Russia and China will increase in the region. And in some ways, at least, that takes the region away from the EU. Because of the environmental public procurement standards of China, it makes it harder for Serbia, for example, to meet the terms of the acquis. Serbia is integrating more with Russia and the Eurasian Economic Union in a way. It signed a free trade agreement with the whole Eurasian Economic Union recently. That's incompatible with EU membership. And so I think we're not, in certain ways, we're not even standing still. You can make the argument that we're even going backwards a little bit. And the final point would be the politics. I mean, I'm an economist, but I mean, I think I would also acknowledge that politics is central to this. Okay, North Macedonia, Montenegro, there's a relatively quick way into the EU feasibly. But for the other countries, the political question is central, and particularly the relationship between Serbia and Kosovo and the normalization of relations and the recognition of Kosovo. And to be very blunt, it needs a big outside role from the EU and the US, and it needs really a very big offer to Serbia, basically. I mean, it's a very maybe unpopular thing to say, but until we have something like this, this big outside push intervention, I'm afraid that, okay, maybe not for North Macedonia and Montenegro, but for the other 4 countries, it's hard to give a positive answer to Franco's question.
I would like to join the discussion, Franco, if I may. First of all, I'd like to say that I fully agree with all points you, Richard, have just shared with all of us. And I would like to start perhaps with the last one. I agree that outstanding political issues are in a way blocking democratic development in each of the economies. The huge energy is taken not only from the leaders, but from the broad administration, and it goes deeper. You wouldn't believe how many people are engaged in saying this or that about Kosovo, or saying this or that about Serbia in diplomacy or both economies, and the others as well. Therefore, enormous energy is gone. This energy could have been used in a much better way, because I think Serbia has a lot to offer, not only for the region, but also for Europe, when it comes to economy, culture, environment, in all areas, and there are perfect, great people all over the region. Therefore, I agree that these outstanding issues are in a way taking a lot of energy from everyone. Therefore, I'd be actually a bit more optimistic. I believe that a recent appointment of Lajčák to deal with the dialogue, more engaged attitude of some of the member states, engage U.S. administration. Let us see what happens after the elections. But I somehow believe that we are going towards a key moment in which the compromise should be possible. I fully subscribe with what you have said. The problem is that I don't see an offer for Serbia at the moment, and I'm not I'm not sure whether everyone around Serbia, including those who are in the dialogue, understand that there has to be an offer, and this offer should be related to the EU membership, but not only for Serbia, but also for the region. Second point, it is true that what I was saying related to regional economic cooperation is actually based, you said, well, your fear is this a subsidy, is this instead of, is this a big parking lot? I would say that, first of all, I think there is an awareness deeply in the hearts of the leaders and the people that this is not going to happen tomorrow, the EU membership. Therefore, I think what's been offered now is a way to really engage in promoting regional cooperation. And if I would dare to say here in this conversation that this regatta policy, which is a flagship in the EU, I'm not sure is going to happen in the coming years, one by one. Therefore, I think it is worth investing in effort the way we've started years back, and we are going to continue. I think Regional Cooperation Council, in close cooperation with the European Commission, to bring these economies together in all of these economic terms and to constantly synchronize them with the EU is the way to come to the point when there is a readiness in the EU to discuss membership, perhaps to discuss membership for all. Frankly, I'm not sure whether I would say this publicly everywhere, but this is exactly what I feel. We are getting to that point, that this is why there is such an investment. Third point, we are trying to do the best we can at this point in time, and this is to use a supportive attitude coming from the EU to see what other options are open when it comes to integrating the Balkans into different already existing initiatives currently meant only for the EU member states to be open for the Balkans as well. And this sectoral approach eventually might be capitalized as a big bang at a certain point in time. I don't want to play with the dates. So I think that we are only realistic, and through regional economic area, we are trying to bring the EU standards in all of these sectors. Is it digital? Is it development, human capital? Is it trade? Is it investment? This is an attempt to make sure that we are implementing the EU standard policies, regulations, law in the non-EU territory in order to bring this territory as close as possible for the date, which we don't know when, there will be a time to really discuss engagement. And then you rightly pointing out engagement of other powers. You mentioned China or Russia, the way. Well, I think the more the EU is engaged in the manner I explained and in other policies, the better is for the region and the less room will be for the others. Otherwise, try to put yourself in the shoes of whoever there is leading any of these countries. Well, if you are aware that the EU membership is not going to happen tomorrow, you will try to use what you have available. And this is it. And therefore, and this would be my last point, I apologize, the most important in my eyes at this point is to constantly introduce as much as we can related to rule of law standards and practices in the region. Because in what I've explained, there was not much of mentioning of the rule of law. I was referring at different sectors, and in these sectors we are implementing EU law, but I think that it will be of crucial importance. You mentioned political standards, saying some are getting closer, mentioning Montenegro and North Macedonia, some are not yet there. I think that rule of law understood in a comprehensive manner is going to be a decisive factor in the coming years to change the attitude of those in the EU who are still very cautious when it comes to considering the integration of the Balkans into the EU. Thank you.
Thank you, Goran. I don't know if there is Paolo,
Franco.
I don't know, Gianni, if you have just 1
Franco,
minute.
yeah, well, there will be actually a couple of questions, and I don't want to step in your conversation, and it's very late, unfortunately. So I think, Franco, maybe
okay.
If there are any other.
No, I think we can close. Just I want to add one small thing. I mean, probably Goran, you said right thing when you say that. And I would like to add to this, we are now in a very strange period. And if this kind of assistance, or let's call it post-emergency reconstruction plan, let's call it reconstruction plan, due to the COVID, if this will be seen by the EU as not connected to the status of the accession of the countries, I think this will be a very good chance to, let's say, to give some input to the accession. But if the EU will consider this as, let's say, as a part of the accession talks, that's will stay again in the old fashion, and that will not have any chance to increase the speed. That's my opinion. I don't know. I think with Paolo, Richard, Goran, and Federica, if you want to close the session, and then that will be fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, and of course this period is hard, but as you know, sometimes hard and particularly difficult challenge could open new opportunity, new way to find a solution, and we hope that this time could help us in any case to go on in the best way and to find new solution for, of course, for our company, for our country, and at the end of the day, for our Europe. Thanks so much to all the panelists, to the speakers, the participants, and stay in touch in any case, because we are working all the day, all the year long to organize the next Trieste Investment Forum. We started, generally speaking, in autumn to contact again speakers, new friends. And as I said before, I hope to see you here in presence in Trieste, in perfect shape, in June, yes, probably June 2021. Thanks for your collaboration. Thanks to Franco for your great job, the IT system, Gianfrancesco also, and of course Paolo. Thanks so much. Thanks. And see you next year.
Thanks, Federica.
Thanks, you.
Everybody.
See you in Trieste.
Thank you.
See you in Trieste. Bye-bye.
Yes,
Ciao.
of course. Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody, and all our guests and participants who have been so patient to stay with us for more or less five hours. And that's quite a big result.
Resilience. It's called resilience.
Exactly.
Thank you. Bye.
Good luck. Bye-bye.